travel isn't just about destinations, it's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
So today we are discussing this complex link between politicians and criminal elements. These allegations of criminal ties to politicians and top cops have sent shockwaves across the country. We saw the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, making several damning allegations against high-ranking police officials, including Minister Senzo Mchunu. And among the allegations that he made was that the police minister and the Deputy National Commissioner, Shadrack Sibia, in cahoots with a criminal syndicate linked to the drug trade and involved with business people in organized crime, right? Calls have now mounted for a judicial inquiry into the criminal infiltration into the SAPS and government. And this doesn't just start now. Relationships like this that we often see exist between those in government and some kind of a link with those that are in the criminal underground. If you're going with what General Mkhwanazi says, I mean, during the apartheid era, covert networks involving smuggling, illicit arms deals and political espionage were established, right? Some security officials and even liberation movement operatives allegedly developed ties with criminal syndicates, relationships that did not entirely dissolve with democracy. So the transition to democracy then creates this power vacuum and informal patronage networks, so to speak. So these were often filled by individuals or groups with access to the force, whether you're talking about former operatives, intelligence officers, or gang leaders. And that creates fertile ground, of course, for criminalization of politics. So is that what we're dealing with in South Africa? And we've had instances before where it appeared so. Remember with Jackie Silebi, the former National Police Commissioner, he was convicted in 2010 of corruption for accepting bribes from people like Glenn Agliotti, who was a convicted drug dealer with ties to organized crime. And the police commissioner at the time was accused of protecting drug dealers and tipping them off about investigations. So you've got to ask yourself whether we're dealing with the same situation now. Even with the former president, Jacob Zuma, by the way. I mean, he was widely associated with state capture, right? Largely involving the Gupta family, but also allegedly creating conditions for criminal syndicates to flourish under a compromised state. That's why back in 2018, you are seeing reports that drug syndicates used state intelligence structures to undermine investigations. So let us know your thoughts on 011-883-0702. What are you seeing in as far as this link exists or not between the politicians and the criminal elements? You can send your WhatsApps as well on 072-702-1702. Let me introduce you to my guests this morning. We've got Dr. Simon Howell, who is a senior research fellow at UCT's Center of Criminology. Dr. Howell, thank you for making time. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
We also have Calvin Rafadi, who is a forensic practitioner and crime expert. Calvin, thanks for making time. Hi. We'll come back to Calvin there. We also have Dr. Sandy Africa, who is the Director of Research at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection and Associate Researcher at the University of Pretoria. Dr. Africa, thank you for joining us as well. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Clement. Good morning, Simon. Good morning, Calvin. And good morning to the listeners.
Yeah, I just want us to, in fact, let's start with you, Dr. Africa. Help us understand this historic link and if it exists at all between politicians or the state, so to speak, and of course the criminal elements. This is, yes, it's being raised as a concern now, but this is something has existed before.
Yes, indeed. And I think you've put it so well, Clement, when you said that under apartheid, criminal networks flourished. In fact, criminal networks which had their reaches deep in the apartheid state, and this was actually unearthed through a number of initiatives, through whistleblowers, commissions, and so onwards. That, in fact, has been the history, and I suppose it's a history that has carried over into post-apartheid South Africa, because notwithstanding the best efforts to frame the security services as being the guardians of the Constitution, what has happened over time is that weak institutions have found themselves targeted by criminal networks and undermined the security of the state, and by implication have threatened the stability, the security of the nation as a whole. And you've correctly pointed out those beachheads, times at which we've actually seen how perverse this influence has been, when there have been dramatic revelations, perhaps court cases resulting in convictions, for example, that of the former police commissioner, Jackie Selebi. From time to time, there are questions raised about the role of very senior officials. And so, there are these beachheads from time to time. And I think that what we're seeing right now with the revelations or the allegations made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi are yet again another of these peaks above the surface. But it all, in my view, points to very weak or weakened institutional foundations, because the architecture of the state has been meant to be a solid enough to withstand this, so that the people that we entrust as leaders, or at least who are appointed as leaders of these institutions, can ensure that they do the work that they are meant to do. And sadly, this does not happen.
Yeah.
Without undermining of the institutional fabric of the state.
And Dr. Howell, were you surprised when you heard the allegations from General Mkhwanazi, and how did you look at those allegations with reference to, of course, what Dr. Africa speaks about, these historical links?
Well, in the first instance, I wasn't surprised. I think, these type of revelations have occurred before at various levels with various people. And, there's definitely a precedent that's been set for this type of thing to occur in South Africa. As Dr. Africa said, these types of institutional concerns are embedded in the way in which the state, or the South African state, has operated both during apartheid and post-apartheid. Crime, I think we tend to see criminal acts or we tend to see the way in which these things are committed as sort of, when they become revelations, then immediately we're like, oh, well, someone's done wrong. But, I think a lot of the relationships between criminal entities or organized crime and the state occur in those very small little interactions every day between individuals and individuals in the state and individuals in organized crime. So is that, while these revelations, as Dr. Africa put, are beachheads in which we can see suddenly a whole raft of issues, in fact, they occur every single day, all the time, in the very small interactions that occur between government and whoever, whether it be private citizens or organizations or whatever. So, in this instance, yes, the revelations bring to light further concerns, but these type of acts are embedded within the logic of state and the way in which the state has functioned for many years now. And that of course is problematic. That's not to say that, this is acceptable, but rather that these type of things have become so, I think, these things have become so accepted in the small interactions that occur every day that they're no longer questioned. I mean, if you think of a common example is the bribes that people pay if you're caught speeding or something. It's almost accepted now to do that, and that type of thing collectively or cumulatively undermines the rule of law and the state as a and they result in these big ramifications and big revelations that occur from time to time, which, ultimately bring to light further criminal concerns.
Yeah. So what are the consequences of this, Dr. Africa? What threats does the link between organized crime and politician or political elites pose to, I suppose, good governance, to state security, to development, to just broadly our democracy?
In the first instance, Clement, they take away resources. We have so many problems within our country that the resources should be directed towards. And if we don't actually have, solid institutions at all levels, obviously within these structures that are meant to combat crime, and, organized crime is on the rise at alarming levels. In fact, it's, in the words of the Global Initiative Against Organized Crime, it's become something of an existential threat to South Africa because of the 7 or 8 categories of crime, organized crime, that they've identified as recently as 2022 and a risk assessment that they did and actually presented to government, including illicit drug dealing, illegal firearms, trafficking, human trafficking, wildlife trafficking, and then others, including organized violence, such as political killing, kidnapping for ransom or extortion, and then the attacks or undermining of critical infrastructure, organized corruption, illegal mining, mass public transport violence. These kinds of crimes really are drowning the state because the state has to respond. But if it is spread so thin, then it is not going to be effective in dealing with any of them. And so, the public has actually called attention to a number of concerns, those which you and I as ordinary citizens are seeing. And Simon is just mentioning one of those, that is the kind of everyday normalization of petty crime. And it's upon this that the bigger and bigger picture starts to emerge, such that these small things can actually aggregate into huger problems. So what am I saying? It's that the fact that we aren't addressing these smaller instances allows and creates the fertile ground for them to aggregate into bigger and bigger problems. And when people all over the world see that we are an open market for this kind of activity, crime then becomes entrepreneurized. And this is why we have people actually making a living out of this. And this essentially is the nature of organized crime. So much of the crime that we are seeing also has transnational characteristics. It may operate or originate from abroad, or our organized syndicates have links with people, in other parts of the country. So it really is a huge existential crisis, which is fundamentally affecting our ability to deal with the real challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, and just ensuring that the citizens and the people of the country have a chance of a better life. Too many of our resources are going into this, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem, which means that more and more resources have to be directed towards addressing this. So it requires hugely systemic changes, political will, strong and good leadership, and in my view, very, very robust system of oversight to ensure that what is supposed to happen is not undermined and compromised.
Yeah, Dr. Howell, what role do state tenders, for instance, or procurement contracts, even strategic appointments, what role do those play in these relationships? Because, I mean, when you really go deeper to hear about the criminal syndicates and the drug cartels that exist and how some of them have relationships with these top cops, it's quite shocking, because it goes to show that these cartels are invested on who becomes, for instance, the next police commissioner or the commissioner in this or the head of this law enforcement agency, because they know that their business can be threatened should it be someone that's not going to be keen to maybe work with them. So when you look at even just the tenders, for instance, or procurement contracts, do they have a role that they play in these kind of relationships? Or it's more about just protection when it comes to the criminal?
I think that they have a fundamental relationship. They create, on the one hand, they create the environment in which the use of or the division or the devising of criminal or organized crime elements becomes embedded within the state. So is that it's not simply that the state is separate to organized crime, but rather the state is doing business with organized crime. They create that environment in which this type of the rule of law and the breaking of the rule of law is an acceptable undertaking. But that on further, beyond that, they also a lot of these contracts and a lot of these tenders result in people undertaking services for or in part or beyond or because of the state, and results in which they cannot effectively complete the contracts, and the result is that the state itself is undermined, and the state can no longer provide the services and the essential services that it has promised to and should be providing to the citizenry. So, it undermines the state's ability to actually continue the logic of governance in society. Beyond that, there is also, it creates opportunities for people to embed themselves within state apparatus that ultimately, allow them to position themselves in strategically useful positions, but which enhance and further strengthen their business opportunities, which may be linked to organized crime or may be in themselves a form of organized crime. So, again, there's the sharp division between the state and organized crime is no longer possible to make. It's a very blurry line, and it is blurred considerably by tenders and by business interactions, business relationships between the state and state organs and criminal entities. And it's for that reason that it's no longer possible, I don't think, to simply extract the state from organized crime or organized crime from the state. We can no longer simply cleave them apart, because the relationships between them are so fundamentally embedded within the logic of governance in this country that it's become part and parcel of the day-to-day interactions and the day-to-day for ways in which governance is undertaken in South Africa. So, the big concern here is how do you move forward from that when it's the division between the two are no longer easy to make.
Oh my goodness! So and to follow up on that, Dr. Africa, how do we move away from that? How can we start to untangle this political criminal network? Is it even possible to do that?
I think, firstly, it's important to have some perspective. And here I fully agree with Dr. Howell that these linkages are becoming so intertwined. But at the same time, lest we throw up our hands and think that there's nothing that can be done, let us also remember that within the state apparatus, there are good, honest people just going to work, doing what they're expected to do, going beyond the core of duty very often in order to ensure that the services they are supposed to provide, be it healthcare services or security services or education services, actually do happen. And the same would go for the police. And so I do think that we must acknowledge that our state, at least this is my view, is not, so hopelessly collapsed and compromised that, as some would say, it has become a wholesale mafia state. So let's separate out the good from the bad and actually consolidate the good. Let us actually applaud those areas where the state, with a little resources, because we also know that we are in a fiscal crisis, is doing what it can, and direct our attention, shine the spotlight on those areas where there are weaknesses. And what does this require? This requires that at the very top, the entrusted parties, the entrusted executives must actually exercise the best due diligence, and we must have faith in those individuals and institutions, that they are actually conducting due diligence to the extent that we expect of them. Let's remember that the president, as the head of state, appoints members of an executive to assist him in the civil oversight of all these institutions, be it the police or the defense or the education. And so we must have our trust in them. However, those individuals are public servants who are accountable to Parliament. And so Parliament must play its role. And so I think we must welcome the decision of the Speaker to, some say it's kind of kicking the ball down the road, but in my view, a 2-week window in which to call all these individuals, get them to account for why they have, either breached protocol or felt they had to act in the way that they did, say what they did, when they did, and how they did it, to do that investigation and come up with the recommendations. This is, in fact, they should not actually have been chasing their tails as they now are, but parliamentary oversight has for too long been too weak and too blunt an instrument. The independent authorities that are supposed to strengthen our democracy very often complain that they are tied at the wrist. They actually don't have the powers and the teeth that they need to function effectively. They are beholden to the executive. We need people to look at that. And then, of course, within the services themselves, there really needs to be better controls, oversight. Other institutions who from time to time say that they are going to manage certain processes better really need to step up to the plate and do that. We heard some time ago that Treasury was going to be centralizing procurement processes. And yet, when you look at how some of these things are happening, it seems as though that's not particularly effective. And it may well be because of the nature of this world of crime, very much intelligence driven, and the intelligence services very often made to believe that they have the right to do things secretly. I do think that we just need much more scrutiny and oversight over how our institutions function.
Yeah, that takes us to 11:31.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
22 minutes before 12 o'clock. It's our Thursday dialogue, and we're talking about this complex relationship or link between politicians and the criminal element. I've got a WhatsApp here from Mez who says, Clement, basically what your panel is saying is South African citizens, you're on your own. Well, Mez, I think we are on our own. In fact, the more you start understanding how big these criminal elements are and how what is happening now is actually what we know is just but a fraction. They are big, powerful people and syndicates that are fighting behind the scenes. And Gogo Obrimachikli explained it so well yesterday, that this doesn't even start now. Even before this democracy, there's always been this link that exists. And as you've heard, some of these relationships were built even during apartheid in the underground between some of the ANC operatives and some of the criminals. And some of those relationships didn't dissolve post our democracy. So what does that mean? Where do you think we are, and how do we move away from this kind of structure that seems to be the case in many, if not at all, governments across the world? Let's start with your WhatsApps that have come on 072 702 1712.
Good morning, Clement. If I listen, or based on what I've read, it's not just South Africa that's suffering from this. We're a country, there's like two parallel governments, as you said yesterday. So even in the U.S., when you look at it, there's the business and the politicians. So can your panel just tell us which country has got a better grasp on this? Which model should we be following in South Africa for us to have a better handle on the government not being run by gangsters, mafia, or people who've got ill intent? Just give an example of a country or a model that we can follow, that we can have better controls. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Dr. Howell, are there even countries that, because this is not like immune, like there are countries, it's not like there are countries that are immune to having these kind of dynamics. And this listener gives us even the example of the United States. Are there governments across the world that we could look to who have managed to deal with a system like this?
Well, yes, I mean, there are examples from around the world, but in different ways. So I'd be hesitant to simply draw wholesale from one specific country or say that, this place offers the model that we ought to adopt. Rather to say that, especially considering that South Africa is an incredibly complex society and an incredibly complex country that is the result of a long history of violence and exclusion. And therefore, it's not so easy to simply look to other places, because there's very few other places that match us, or, which can be seen in some ways parallel to us. So that being said, there are of course elements from different areas that we might think to draw from. And, you could cite elements from, from the US in terms of, the way in which the structures of governance are positioned so as that they provide the sort of oversight that we would like to have. So, think of their judicial review process is quite powerful, and effective. And in the same way, you might say that you could draw from the UK in terms of the way in which the constitutional mandate is embedded within the culture of politics. So as if someone is found to be corrupt, they immediately resign and walk away, and that's it. There's no big, continue to be paid, even though you're not at work type of thing. It's just you're done, you're fired, and that's it. In the same way, you could draw bits of the responses from Uruguay and places in South America that have responded to organized crime using police forces and the criminal justice system. And there have been some successes there, and they have been quite effective. So, it depends on which element you're speaking of and what you'd like to draw from. But for me, the important thing is to remember is that South Africa is quite unique, and South Africa needs to look towards and into itself to find the solutions that are best suited for itself. And I think we have the intellectual capacity, we have the resources, and we have the motivation to do this. So it's time that we build our own capacity and deal with these things effectively for ourselves and by ourselves.
Here's another voice note.
Hi, Clement. Regarding your conversation, the way that General Nkwanazi held his press conference with the tactical gear and the armed gunmen, masked gunmen, reminded of a West African coup d'etat type situation, which should not be tolerated and was the wrong way to do it, but we needed the information to get out. So if that was the way, then it happened now. So I want to know who investigates whom here? The police, the government officials. I mean, there's a lot of people that would be implicated: government officials, policemen, private persons, corporate persons. So who investigates this? Who is clean? I mean, Nkwanazi, police commissioner, police minister, Mkhunu, they're all in some way implicated in something. So who will investigate this, and who is the angel here to investigate? Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Dr. Sandy Africa. I mean, you raised an issue even before the headlines about independent institutions. And the question now is, because you've got South Africans now that are going to be worried even about the capacity, for instance, of the SAPS to even do proper investigations. As the listener asked, who investigates who, and how do we get to then have confidence even in those decisions to investigate, or even in those investigations if decisions have been taken to investigate?
Yeah, it's a complex one, and let's not forget that there actually were investigations unfolding and which were leading to arrests. I think that the acting head of crime intelligence had been arrested. There were rumors of the actual commissioner of being arrested or about to be arrested before all this blew up. So in a sense, the ongoing work of policing in all this drama is unfolding. Apart from the parliamentary inquiries, which the Speaker has asked for, there have been calls for a judicial commission, and the President, public expects, is going to say or do something. But the listener is absolutely correct. We actually do need a robust system where, the very guardians of the Constitution, if they slip up or if they are accused of slipping up, can also be brought to book. And I think this is where there's a lot of work to be done. My view is that this, some say it's heralding the start of a huge crisis, but my fear is that this will blow over. It does require us, if we're going to get to the bottom of this problem, to have a very systemic and perhaps a longer term view on how to deal with this problem, which has been with us, as you pointed out, from the apartheid years, and it has just rolled over. I think we need to understand organized crime. I think that we need long-term strategies. And I think that we need all of government and all of society approach. Yeah. And it's in this context that, the most effective institutions are not these short-term, I suppose, tactical response units, which are very much favored by our state as responses to deep systemic problems are put in place. So it may not be comforting, but I do think that this does give us a window to take a hard look at ourselves and come up with more enduring systemic changes to the whole system of criminal justice in this country.
Yeah. It's 12 minutes before 12 o'clock. Madipi, Joseph, I see your calls. I'll start with them after the break.
Over the years, you've heard me ask Wealth Manager Warren Ingram the big questions. How do we invest wisely? How do we protect our family's future? All those conversations, that entire library of financial expertise is now available as a podcast. Straightforward advice to help you build your wealth on demand. Just search for Warren Ingram's Personal Finance wherever you get your podcasts.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
9 minutes before 12 o'clock. Let me start with your calls. Madipi, you're calling us from Pretoria. Hi.
Hi, Clement.
Sure.
My name is Maditsi.
Maditsi. Great. Thank you, brother. Maditsi, go ahead.
Anyway, I want to preamble my question with this. In my reckoning, what motivates politicians and the bureaucrats to establish relationship with the underworld? Is the prospect of the rewards that may flow as a result of that relationship. So, what is it that can be done in terms of policy to make sure that the politicians and bureaucrats get rewards, but also along with those rewards, there should be a stick in case they gravitate towards the underworld, even though they have these rewards, generous rewards that they get. Is there a case study elsewhere where this particular model is being implemented or is being explored?
Yeah, I get what you mean, Maditsi. Thank you. That's a great one. I mean, with judges, we've got it where that system with judges where they become judges for the rest of their lives until you're, of course, impeached. But part of the reason is that, you shouldn't be, too easily swayed by even attempts to try and influence you in your professional life. Dr. Howell, do you want to respond to that? I mean, surely if these politicians or these government officials end up getting into these relationships with criminals, there's something then that clearly motivates them. So what can be done then? Are there incentives? How do we ensure that they don't get easily tempted?
Well, on the one hand, I don't think the state can compete with organized crime in terms of short-term incentives. I mean, it's simply that it does pay, and I mean, it pays a lot more than the state often. So in those instances, I don't think there should be some sort of system where the state sets up a commensurate incentivized scheme that sort of encourages people not to commit crime. That's not going to work. Rather, I think on the one hand, there needs to be significant and more rigorous implementation of oversight mechanisms and checks and balances and the like, so is that, it's not as easy, simply put, to engage with organized crime, and it's not so easy to allow for others to engage in organized crime. So, there needs to, and that's not only at the broader national level, but right down to the operational mandates and the frameworks within which people conduct business and conduct the business of state every single day. Those type of practical and implementable changes need to occur. On the other hand, I think we need to begin asking from our public servants what public servants need to begin asking themselves, what is it that they're doing and why are they doing it? There needs to be, people need to realize that in working for the state or working through the state, that there is a call there that you are working for the public good and for the public interest. And that should ultimately provide you with the framework, the moral and ethical framework within which to conduct yourself. I don't think there's no way of extensively policing this type of activity all the time. I mean, people will ultimately have opportunities to move beyond their official mandate quite regularly. So people need to police themselves. And for that instance, then that requires that people have honest discussion with themselves about what it is they want to do and how they want to do and who they are. And I think that, that is ultimately, and of course that can be supplemented with vetting and various forms of sort of HR policy. But ultimately, much like being a police officer is a calling, we need to have people in government who have the best interests of the state at heart.
Here, let's hear from Joseph in Pretoria. Joseph, hi.
Clement, good afternoon. How are you?
Sure, man. Go ahead.
Good. Years back, I was incarcerated with a very high-profile individual that had a warrant from Interpol, and we shared a floor, and then we had discussions. When you guys are bored, in prison, you have to have discussions, etc., etc. And we had a discussion about his connections to high-profile individuals in the cabinet, number one, and from the police service, and how he got to that. And he mentioned something to me that, you know what, it's very easy for me to get to the top if I have the right people from the bottom, and also if I have the funds and means to make their life more luxurious, etc., etc. And then I said, okay, but then how safe are you if someone then whistleblows tomorrow and says, okay, but it's fine, this person paid me the following, etc., etc., because out of fear of their lives, etc. And he said, you know what, South Africans are prone and are very gullible to corruption because of the top, bros, and that's from the president self down to the bottom. And it starts at the bottom for you to be able to get to the president. So I'm talking about someone that had connections to ministers, similar to what's happening now. And when we got out, I got out first, and then he came out, and because I was trying to do some rehabilitation programs, I reached out to him because he gave me his details that, you know what, when you're out, let me know if I can assist, because I wanted to do a couple of things. But I wanted to do it the right way because I'm rehabilitated, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
And I started at the Department of Education. That door was shut, and then I went to NYDA. That door was shut because I couldn't pay a bribe of 35,000 so that they can issue me with funding, etc. So now, because that door was shut, I had to opt to make that call.
Yeah.
I made that call. I said, you know what, I need your assistance because this is actually what I'm passionate about, and then I want to change people's lives. I don't want to be indebted to you in any way because I don't want to fall back to where I was again. And he said, no, it's fine. I'm going to make a call. Someone will call you, and you're going to do it the right way. Submit your proposal. My proposal was done by the assistance of people that are very good at what they do. And I submitted that proposal, and I got a call from someone who didn't mention their name, and then I went there, we met.
Wow. After his intervention. Wow. Joseph, I'm out of time, but what a story you're sharing with us. Thank you so much. I think, that just tells us, what we're dealing with here. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thanks to Dr. Simon Howell and Dr. Cindy Africa for joining us. It's 2 minutes before 12.
Over the years, you've heard me ask Wealth Manager Warren Ingram the big questions. How do we invest wisely? How do we protect our family's future? All those conversations, that entire library of financial expertise is now available as a podcast. Straightforward advice to help you build your wealth on demand. Just search for Warren Ingram's Personal Finance wherever you get your podcasts.